Hi Jews. Today I want to talk a little bit about the spiritual path of Judaism and the difference between the unholy spiritual practices and the spiritual practice of Judaism and the information that the Jews were given in the Torah. And my experiences as a yoga practitioner for 20 years. I've talked a little bit about it in previous videos, but as I've been discussing recently about Chassidut and why, the Gaon from Vilna and the Beit Din of Vilna and other B'tei Din, the courts of law of the Jews back when Chassidut was just getting started, why they were excommunicated. So I want to explain a little bit with more of something I think that we can more understand, since a lot of Jews are interested in spirituality, but wouldn't guess, just like I didn't, to look for that in Judaism for some reason. And this is all actually explainable because there are actually answers to all the questions that we have. And people before us have asked those exact same questions. Okay, so it just comes from us not knowing actually the information, what's in the Torah. So I talk about this also in previous videos. I have a video, I'm going to link it in my description, called Why God commanded the Jews not to believe in him. He commanded us to learn. And from that video, which I took a lot of information, again, from Rabbi Yinun Kalazan, which you can go to his YouTube channel and learn a ton of things from him. So in that class that I'm going to link about not believing in God, but learning and understanding. So again, pretty much since Sukkot, my whole awareness is really about understanding and Binah. So you can go back and look at some of those videos also. But I'm going to talk today about the Rambam, Hilachot Yesodei HaTorah 8:1, and what the Rambam there says also about following, people who do miracles and wonders, okay? Because that's very attractive to us. We want to follow someone we think knows more than we do. But you know what? We can know, and we are expected actually to know about our reality. And we actually have the guidebook. Again, the Torah in Hebrew is horaot, hora'ah. Instructions. It's like an instructional manual to our reality. So we're going to look a little bit here now about the spiritual information, okay, and my understanding and my experiences following yoga. So one of the things that I liked about yoga was it's very structured. There's actually 8 steps to yoga, where the last step after meditation is to basically attain a spiritual awareness of some sort of God-like energy or whatnot. Okay, I'm not going to get too much into this because it's a waste of our time to look at other information when we in fact have the whole truth right here. Okay, but what I'm going to say is that in yoga, also on your way to this, which by the way, people can also get that just spontaneously. And I'm going to explain a little bit about this because it's very interesting and tie it into the Hilachot Yesodei HaTorah. So first, let me explain the difference. Okay, so there's a holy side to the spiritual reality and an unholy side, okay, which is called in our information the Sitra Achara, the other side. Other side of what? Other side of holiness. Because actually, in on milvado, there is nothing other than Hashem, God, the Creator, our God, God of our fathers, Abraham, Yitzchak, and Yaakov, the God that wrote the information, that gave us the information, that Moshe Rabbeinu, who was the highest prophet, I'm going to explain all this, okay, wrote it down for us and gave us both the written Torah and the oral Torah, which wasn't written down for a very long time because the people that received the information had a higher spiritual level. They didn't need it to be written down, but they wrote it down for us because they knew that as time would go on, for many different reasons, okay, that we would lose a little bit of or a lot of our spiritual level We are here, 5,785. We don't have neither the intellectual capacity, okay, or the spiritual level that we would be able to understand all of this just in general. Anyway, even if we spent all of our lives just learning it and trying to learn it, everyone will understand to the degree that they learn the information and practice the spiritual practice and become more pure. I've explained this in lots of my previous videos. So at today's date, 5,785, so we have all of the information, and we know that after every Shabbat, okay, we make a difference. We mark the difference between holy and unholy by saying a havdalah. Okay, so there's a little ceremony that we do called havdalah, which means a differentiation, basically, between the holy and the unholy, between the nation of Israel and all of the other 70 nations. Okay, who did not receive the Torah. It is not their inheritance as it is ours. It was also passed down in an unbroken chain from father to son. Now, we also have to know that the whole entire nation of Israel, okay, that came out of Egypt, and there was about 3 million people there, okay, they witnessed and had a revelation of God, all of them. Okay, and from that time onwards, they relayed the story to their sons, and they told them that they have to relay this information unchanged to their sons. And so it went all throughout time. And that's why we still know that we are Jews in today's date. And we still tell this exact same story, okay, that's Passover, to our children. Okay, we're witnesses to the revelation of God at Mount Sinai. All of us, 3 million people. Okay, and since then, other peoples have built their belief systems and their religions based on that. Okay, this has never happened, and God actually promised us that there will never be another nation, that all people will come and say that this happened and that they all had a revelation. We all became prophets at that moment. Okay, and so other religions are based off of one person seeing something, one person saying something, or one person chopping off everybody's head if they don't convert to that religion, or a bunch of people chopping off everyone's head, okay? But so we do a havdalah. We say that there's a difference between the holy and the unholy by the nation of Israel and all the other nations in light and darkness. Okay, I do talk about this in other videos. I don't want to go into it right here because I do want to talk about the Sitra Achara. So we're not necessarily talking about Satanism. Okay, we're not talking about, that's an extreme, but we do know that people like the Freemasons and like the satanic cults and the 1% satanic elite and all those groups of people do worship Satan directly. Okay? And everything in between. Okay? So there's a holy and the unholy, and there is like kind of a gradient. Okay? So when I understand now what I was learning and doing there in yoga, I kind of understand a little bit more, first of all, where it came from, okay? Because Avraham we're told specifically to go back and look at and this is in Ishaya, in Isaiah, I don't know, 48 to 50, I think, somewhere there, where Isaiah tells us, that God tells us, okay, at the end of time, because it's an end time prophecy, which again, we have to realize that time is going to end. That is why there are end time prophecies. Okay, so in Ishaya, it tells us, go back and look from where you came from, Jew. You come from Avraham and Sarah, because Avraham and Sarah only had one child, Yitzchak. Okay, but Avraham had other sons, and some of the other sons that he had, he sent to the east. Okay, these are sons of Keturah. And he gave them gifts, which we understand. Bina, again, is understanding. He gave them gifts which basically were some spiritual information, okay? But not this. This information he solely gave to his one son that he had with Sarah, Imanu, and that is Yitzchak, okay? And then this information was given, and it is a blessing to know this information, to his son Yaakov, who became Yisrael, and Yisrael had 12 tribes, and from the tribe of Levi, and I have a whole class just about the tribe of Levi, what we can learn from them, and Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, came from the tribe of Levi. Now, so in yoga, for example, okay, so this is actual information, okay, and one of the things that I liked there was I saw that their books and stuff came from a long time ago, okay, even before the Torah. So I thought this is more reliable information because it's older, okay, not understanding, again, where it came from and how this information was transmitted and why it was written down only here. Okay, in a later date, okay, so Avraham up here gave information to his sons, okay, and they went to the east, okay, so my guess is that some of this information come from there. And since there are a lot of similarities now that I know in the Torah and in the information that I was learning there, I can understand that better, okay? But what attracted me to yoga, first of all, I didn't have to, what I think, look a certain way to practice yoga. And I didn't have to change that much. I didn't have to stop going out on Saturday and on Friday night and doing my thing and, dating who I wanted to date and behaving however I wanted to behave and whatever. There was really not that many rules, although there are, because like I said, there's 8 steps here, not just the third step. What we think about when we think about yoga is just the physical, okay? The asanas. Okay, who cares? So most people that we can see today also who are involved with yoga just focus on this, the physical aspect, okay? So parallels again, we see a lot of Jews in our reality who are Jewish, and you're Jewish, but it is not connected to any spiritual information, okay? That's like doing yoga without the other 7 steps, where the first 2 are really trying to perfect yourself, okay? That's not what we see. That was one thing that also actually bothered me in the yoga world, was that there's so much deep information about how to transform your life, how to obtain more, a more peaceful mind, how to quiet the chatter in your head, and how to relax your nervous system, all these things that are built in here. And people were just like going to do yoga. Like you go to the gym and you do yoga. Great. So you miss out on all this stuff. Same thing with Judaism. And by the way, I see that here also in the Orthodox community. Maybe I'll touch on that a little bit. But again, to get to the point, the way that the Sitra Achara, the unholy side, works also is that here also in yoga, as you climb the tree of yoga on the 8 steps, okay, one of the things that's supposed to happen as you come to a blending in with this universal oneness, okay, is you can obtain certain powers. There's a certain word for that. I'm not going to say any of the stuff, but you can obtain certain spiritual powers. Wow, that's very attractive and that's very seducing, I think. And so we read also about certain yogis, okay, that achieved this level and they were able to, do certain things and they had spiritual powers, and that's very interesting. We want to follow those kinds of people. Okay, and there's all these stories about what they did, and there's not necessarily proof of any of that. Okay, but there's stories, and we like that, and we want that also. We want to be special. We want to have certain spiritual powers. Okay, and when I used to go to a lot of different, courses and meetings and all these things, meditations and all this stuff, people would have all these stories. Oh, I saw this angel and I saw that, and everyone was having all these experiences. And I'm like, okay, I didn't. I learned a lot, okay? And I was able to understand a lot, and it changed my life in a lot of ways because I changed my life according to this information. But what I'm saying is that just because there are stories, just because there are spiritual powers, okay? So maybe some of those yogis and babas and whatnot did have spiritual powers, but that doesn't mean something good. There's a difference between the holy and the unholy. And in fact, the Rambam, this is exactly what he's talking about in Hilachot Yesodei Torah, where he says that, okay, so we know, okay, again, Passover, when the nation of Israel was taken out of Egypt, and I talk a lot about this, that we can think of Egypt as mental slavery also, okay? So it was also physical slavery, but it was also mental slavery, of which the tribe of Levi was not enslaved. And Moses came from that tribe, Moshe Rabbeinu. Okay? So there were, as we know, 10 plagues. Plagues. I don't know how to spell that. And because Egypt, okay, there were sorcerers in Egypt that had spiritual powers, okay? We're told that there are 10 measures of sorcery that God gave to the world, okay? And Egypt had 9 of them, okay? Very, very high sorcerers that were there, okay? And we also know from the Torah that there were also big sorcerers. Their names are Bilak and Bilam, which we have to also remember every single day, okay? We're told, remember that. So they thought, okay, the sorcerers in Egypt, they thought that Moshe Rabbeinu was a sorcerer. Okay, they never seen anything like what happened there in Egypt with the 10 plagues because God was doing them. God was fueling these miracles. Okay, so the Rambam says that the Israelites, okay, did not believe in Moses, Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, because of the signs he performed. For one who believes because of signs retains doubts in their heart. Misha mevin al nasim v'moftim or something like that. Yelo dofi belibo. Dofi, do P. There'll always be, I explained this better in my class about not believing in God, but you cannot believe something just because of miracles and wonders, because we know that the unholy side has spiritual powers. Okay, so if you believe something just because of spiritual powers, just because someone comes and does spiritual powers, you'll always have in your heart a doubt. Did it come from God or did it come from the Sitra Achara, the other side? Because they also have the ability, okay, they have spiritual abilities. Okay, so you cannot believe in that, because one who believes in signs and wonders retains doubt in the heart, thinking that perhaps the signs were performed through magic or sorcery. Rather, all the signs he performed in the desert were done as needed, not to prove his prophecy, okay, but for practical purposes. Okay, so they needed to walk through the sea, so they split the sea. Okay, it wasn't to impress these people and to prove that he was powerful or anything. And they needed food in the desert, so Hashem, God, provided the manna, okay, and to provide the quails, to draw the water from the rock, to cause Korach's assembly to be swallowed up, and all the other acts that happened, okay, was not to convince anybody there about God or the Torah. They were needed, okay? However, the belief in Moses was established at Mount Sinai when our own eyes and our own ears heard the divine's voice speaking to him. And we heard, Moshe, Moshe, go tell them such and such. Okay? We heard, the whole nation of Israel, 3 million plus people, heard God speaking to Moses. And only then did the nation believe in Moshe Rabbeinu and in God, and in a belief that we are told that would last throughout time. Okay? Not in a belief because of magic and wonders. Because it will always, if you come to understand anything about reality, you will have to know that these miracles and wonders could happen from the other side, the Sitra Achara. And we have plenty of stories in the Torah itself, okay, that talk about Bilak and Bilam. And we are told to remember every single day Bilak and Bilam. Why? So that we will never forget, okay, that there are other people in reality who have access to spiritual powers that do not come from God. And Rabbi Kalazan, in that class that I reference in my class called Why God Commanded Us Not to Believe in Him, he says that what is the connection between somebody who comes and tells you that God sent them and then they do miracles and wonders for you, okay? Or there are stories of miracles and wonders that are performed, okay? What's the connection? There's no connection, okay? You can do miracles and wonders without there being any connection at all to God. That is the information, okay, that a Jew must know and understand and convince himself how? By learning the information. You cannot get around learning the Torah, Jews. You can't, okay? So you want to go and follow. You want to go and follow a tzaddik. And a tzaddik just means really a righteous person. Or you want to go follow a rebbe, right? Because you heard about all these amazing stories. And I did too. When I started looking into Judaism, I heard about all these things and I was like, wow. But you know what? The more I started to learn, the more I started to understand, the more I started to realize this is just exactly the same thing here as what happened here in yoga. All the same stories, pretty much, by the way. Okay? So a lot of people don't dedicate 20 years of their life to going and learning some foreign avodah zarah. Okay? But you'll dedicate your whole life to be a Hasidic Jew. Cult. Okay? Because again, the stories, oh, he did this, oh, he can do that, oh. Stories. You should have dupi. You should have a doubt in your heart. Are these stories? What's a connection? There's no connection. Okay? There's no connection. And that is why people, you can obtain this level by following and this guidebook. Okay? At the time of the Talmud, where a lot of people don't understand this, and I certainly didn't, okay? Because I thought like, oh, rabbis changed everything. We can't believe them. We can believe them, okay? At the time of the Talmud, those rabbis were such high spiritual and cognitive consciousness, okay, God awareness consciousness. All of them had powers. Why don't you hear stories about them? Because that's not the point, okay? That's not the point. That is a point here in the Unholy, Sitra Achara, whatever, to have powers. Why do you need powers? Why would you want powers? What are you going to do with powers? Maybe form a cult around you, take everybody's money and get whatever you want. And usually, also here in yoga, as you can go and learn and see, most of these yoga cults end up in sexual harassment, rape, and so forth. Okay? Rape. Always ends up somehow sexual. Same here. Hasidic Jews. You can go and Google that. You can go and watch all the documentaries, all the people that come out of Hasidic cults that say like what they do there. Okay? That's where that leads all of the time. Okay? That's not happening here. If people are learning the Torah, because learning the Torah itself will heal your soul. Okay? So even just with the zero understanding, you could go and learn the Torah and it would heal your soul. Okay? And you will have real, actual peace and not some sort of blending in with some sort of universal oneness, okay? Which, like I said, people can obtain spontaneously. So meaning they didn't do any work at all on themselves. They didn't perfect their character, didn't perfect themselves, didn't do anything, and somehow became what they think is enlightened spiritually. And what I can tell you, because like I said, I spent 20 years learning this information and practicing it, okay, is that when there's something called the Kundalini, which is the serpent energy, okay, the serpent energy that's coiled around the coccyx. It's the second chakra. It doesn't matter. It's connected actually to the sexual drive. And the idea here is that you can awaken this energy and it will open all your chakras and you will get spiritual enlightenment. Okay? But chas v'shalom, if that's what happens to you, and Baruch Hashem, thank God, God protected me from ever getting here. Because what happens when you do that is that you become like the serpent, the snake, cursed. You suddenly, people have expressed and told me, and I know people, that they lose all desire for life. Things that made them happy don't make them happy anymore. Everything is gray. Everything is tasteless. Everything is whatever. And that's exactly the curse that Hashem, God, gave the serpent. Okay? That the serpent, God provides everything for all of creation. Food, everything. Okay? But to the serpent, he said, you know what? I'm cut off. You're cut off. You will never go hungry. You'll eat everything, but everything will be like dust to you. Okay? And that's exactly what happens if you awaken this energy and blend into the universal oneness. Okay? Because there is only one path, one holy path to God. Okay? And that one path was given in an unbroken chain and guarded all throughout history by our the smartest Jews, okay? And Moshe Rabbeinu obtained the highest level of prophecy. There is no higher prophet than Moshe Rabbeinu, and we are told that there never, ever will be. So if comes along, okay, anyone, even if they do magical and mystical and miracle things, okay, that's no connection with God, first of all. Anyone can do that. Okay, and especially if they change anything that Moshe Rabbeinu, our teacher, the teacher of the nation of Israel for all time, told us to do or not to do. Okay, so for example, when Moshe Rabbeinu, what's written down in here is that we have to sleep in a sukkah. Okay, and I use this as an example a lot of times because in the only Jewish country, Israel, okay, you know how hard it is to obtain for yourself some sort of house or apartment that will allow you to actually do a sukkah properly? It's extremely difficult. But guess what? Someone came along who did a lot of mystical, magical things, okay, and canceled that. Okay, that's like Judaism 101. You don't change anything, okay? So what people who like to follow and be in cults say is that in every generation there is a Moshe Rabbeinu. Now, that is actually based on some truth, but it's not understood properly, okay? Because we are also told that Moshe Rabbeinu died in the desert and we do not know where he died. Why? So we don't go and worship him, okay? Like some people go to Uman and worship their tzaddik. Or some people go to the Ohel and worship their Rebbe. There we do not know where Moshe Rabbeinu was buried. Okay, and furthermore, we know that there was no dynasty created here. The information and the leadership of the nation did not go to Moshe Rabbeinu's sons. Rather, it went to his best student. Okay, so when you see again in the Hasidic cults that they go and it's a dynasty. If you go and Google Hasidic dynasties, you'll see like a ton of them. And they're all passed down from father to son, whatever. They inherit their dynasty. And if they do not inherit their dynasty, they usually go to the courts, and usually to the Goy courts, which you are excommunicated and put in Nudui or whatever, for even going to those courts, okay? Because the Torah, there's the Jewish laws in the Torah, and there was Jewish courts, like I mentioned before, in the Beit Din of Vilna, the Jewish High Court of Vilna that excommunicated Chabad, okay? So when we now see in our time, 5,785, all of this confusion, okay, we can understand how the Sitra Achara works a little bit. They do have powers, they do have sorcerers, they do have babas, they do have enlightened people, okay? But that doesn't mean they're connected to God or the holy. And we as Jews are commanded to know the difference between the holy and the unholy, the nation of Israel and all of the other nations. And we need to understand, okay, says the Rambam, that just because someone can do miracles, or there's stories, okay, and we're going to go back even to the Baal Shem Tov, which that's where it all started, okay? Okay, and what he was doing was giving names. That's what this means, good names. He was the Baal, the owner, of good names. What does that mean? It means he was writing magical charms for people, okay? And people put all their faith in those magical charms, okay? That's the same stuff that we're seeing here. That also happens here, okay? There's lots and lots of stories here in yoga. Same thing. No connection necessarily to this, okay? And started from this a whole different way to be a Jew. Now you're a Hasidic Jew doing a whole bunch of different things, okay? That's not Judaism, and we are commanded actually to know this. And how will you know this? It's not something that you'll feel necessarily, although people do, okay? But it's something that you need to learn and understand intellectually. God told us, do not believe in me. Learn and understand and know. And once you start to learn, okay, this intellectual engagement with the Torah is going to heal you spiritually anyway. So you will have more receptivity, says King Solomon, to this information, okay? So you can't hope to even understand any of it, okay, if you don't practice the spiritual practice of Judaism, which means doing all the things and not doing all the things, the commandments. And there's a lot of them, okay? So we have a lot of learning to do and a lot of doing and not doing a lot of things to do. So again, just to summarize the Rambam here, miracles alone are insufficient. Even if someone performs wonders or signs, this does not automatically qualify them as a prophet. Miracles are not the primary basis for accepting someone as a prophet, okay? And by the way, also in the Hasidic cult of Chabad, some people got together there and made a psak din. They made a legal whatever they did there to say that the Rebbe was a prophet. Although there are no more prophets there's no more prophecy. Prophecy was ended at the Second Temple period, which we know and we understand. So the true basis for belief, the main reason we accept a prophet, is the commandment given at Mount Sinai, where God explicitly told us is to listen to prophets who meet the Torah's criteria. So again, we need to learn the Torah and understand what the criteria are and why we can believe certain prophets like Isaiah, and Malachi, and all of the other prophets that we have their writings, okay? And a prophet must meet specific qualifications such as being righteous, wise, and consistent with Torah values. Their predictions must also consistently come true. And the Rambam, again, warns us against being misled by false prophets who may perform signs and wonders, but contradict the Torah. Okay, so there's no new way to practice Judaism. We can't change it, neither to reform it, okay, to be secular Jews, cut off from God. Okay, that's not the point. There's no point to being a Jew if you're not going to have any connection with God. That, literally is the whole point, okay? And there's no point, actually, it's incorrect to now believe in something and pray to someone and to hope for your salvation from someone else other than God. That is not Judaism. Okay, so we can understand. Now, I don't suggest anyone go out and spend 20 years of their life investigating the other way. What I'm trying to offer, my friends, is my experience, okay? What I know from having already gone over here and done this and understand how this works and kind of more understand what the Rambam is talking about there, okay? Because it's attractive, and I know that a lot of people find very attractive to put their hope in somebody who's, we want to learn from somebody who's been there, okay? Who's obtained enlightenment. And one of my previous former friends who got a spontaneous spiritual enlightenment, okay, to say that she's impure is, I mean, okay, so the fact that she can attest to the fact that now she feels like she's connected to everybody and it's very beautiful, although she no longer has any interest basically in her life, okay, no happiness whatsoever, unless she's just pieced out and blending into them. That's the only thing that makes her happy, okay? That's not the point of our lives, okay? That's not why we have a physical body. And I'm not suggesting that we're supposed to go and explore all of this stuff and have a great, physical life, okay? No. But what we should do is understand that there is a purpose and a reason God made us a body and a soul together for a certain amount of time, our lifetimes, okay? And the time of the world, okay? There's certain things that have to be done. I did a video once called Jew Have a Purpose, believe it or not. I'm also going to try and put that in my description here. So hopefully that's helpful. Hopefully I've been able to explain a little bit about what I learned and a little bit more about the Rambam telling us in Hilachot Torah that we can't believe in signs and wonders, and we definitely shouldn't believe in stories, okay? Stories. But rather, we should believe in the testimony of 3 million of our ancestors who obtained prophecy and who believed in Moshe Rabbeinu and in God and in the Torah and pass it down in an unbroken chain all throughout history.